Yes.
Right, hi everybody.
There's only so much.
Right, I am going to be talking about Codeception because the main reason is it's not SimpleTest. So you'll have to excuse me if I mess anything up. This is my first public speaking arrangement ever. So the nerves. So I was okay until about 20 minutes ago, and then it sort of hit me like a ton of bricks. So if I start to dawdle or go off, someone just shout, "Shut up and get on with it," and we'll be okay. So my name is Chapman. I'm a developer at Codeception. We're based up at Lee's house. We do UX development, loads of things. It's my Twitter and my Drupal account here. If you've ever gone on Drupal Stack Exchange or seen things retweeted and you've seen this little Lego guy, that's me. Because I had a jumper and a hat and it looked like me, so that it kind of stuck. So does test-driven development in Drupal has generally been quite a difficult thing. In my experience, just because of the way that everything is structured, test-driven development, everything that demonstrates how to do it seems to be driven more towards frameworks that don't have a pointy-clicky interface. Codeception is something I picked up a couple of months back that actually made it a viable option. So does everybody kind of understand what test-driven development is, the principle behind it? I'll just skim over it super quick. Basically, you write your tests first, and it makes you think about what the functionality needs to do. It makes you focus on the task at hand. I mean, how many of us have received a brief or a feature spec and gone, "Wicked, we'll do it that way," and you get sort of 2 days into the build, and all of a sudden you realise you've done it completely wrong and you would have done it differently. Anyone, or is that just me? Right. I'm probably the wrong person to be giving a talk then. So yeah, it's just do your tests first. It just helps you think things. And the workflow for test-driven development would be you get your feature request in, and you write a test, and you run your tests, and they will fail. They should fail. That's the idea. You then write enough code to make your test pass. Now, in the Drupal world, that would probably be, you build a view that provides a minimum functionality. And then you run your test again. And then you do a refactor, so that's when possibly your theme might come in, change some things in the view on the theme level. You run your test again, you make sure they haven't changed the title to be something completely different. And repeat. So it's write a test, write functionality, refactor it, repeat. All the way through. So why would you want to use it? The entire lifespan of your project, you have tests for the features you build. How many people have written tests for things religiously on a project, as opposed to started writing some tests, and then you write a bit of functionality and you think, this is really easy, it doesn't need a test, and then all of a sudden you stop writing them. And you've got tests for maybe a quarter, maybe a third of your code base. If you write your test first, that's not going to happen, because you have to have the test before you can do anything else. So it means you always have that test. Like I mentioned, it forces you to think about features before implementation. Do you really need to install that really super cool module that embeds 20 different video providers on your site, allows for embedding of all those video providers? No, you want a YouTube module. Speeds up your development. Writing tests takes time. One of the things that I found to be a hard sell when trying to get people to sign up for testing is we need to just get the work out. And it just doesn't quite work like that, because the amount of time you then spend testing the work manually afterwards, it's just not performant. ensures you write good quality code. It's fun. That might sound silly. I like automated tests. I like writing a failing test and then making it pass. It's kind of like gamification of your job. I don't know if that makes me a loser. You know, I love it. I think it's great. Really, it is fun. Until you get something that's broken that you built 3 months ago, then it's not so good. And lastly, again, I really want to get this point across. For the lifespan of your project, you have tests. The entire lifespan of your project. If someone comes in 2 years and wants something thrown on, you know you're not going to break anything that you built, you know, at the inception of the project. So, with SimpleTest, this is really difficult, and if you write a full test suite for your site with SimpleTest, it will take forever to run. So, Codeception. Was that clear enough about the TDD stuff, or have I misinterpreted something? You're okay with that? Cool. So what is Codeception? It is a PHP test framework. You can run almost any kind of test you can think of. Why would you choose it? I'm going to go over the tests on this one. Powered by PHPUnit. So if you want to write unit tests, you could still use PHPUnit in them, which is a bit of a boon for Drupal 8. You know, you don't want to learn a test framework A when Drupal 8 stuff is going to be using PHPUnit generally. You can put your PHP units into your Codeception suite and it will run them. Really, really easy to extend. Super easy. It contains the Symfony event dispatcher component, and to extend it, you just listen for those events and then act on them. That's it. It's great. Any type of test you can probably think of. If there aren't any, then let me know and I will try and debunk it. Acceptance tests. It will use Guzzle and the Symfony DOM crawler component to perform basic acceptance tests. So no JavaScript stuff can be tested as default. However, it does have an extension to use the name has completely escaped me. It's the Selenium WebDriver, which you can then run in Chrome, Firefox, Phantom, anything. So you can run JavaScript-based tests, or tests for JavaScript, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit more towards the end. Functional tests. You can't really do strict functional tests with Drupal in Codeception just because of the way Drupal is structured. But I think there's a way around it, so I'm going to look into it over the next couple of months, and you might see something pop up on my GitHub, or let's do it. Unit testing, I've mentioned. You can run 2 kinds of unit tests in Codeception. You can copy and paste your PHP unit tests in, and it will run them. Or there is a helper class that Codeception creates that extends PHP unit test case. I think it is. It has a couple of decorators that are different, but it is just to keep the entire suite looking the same, really. Or you can build your own suite. Codeception ships with a bunch of modules. One of them being a CLI module, for an example. So say your site has a bunch of drush commands. You can create a specific test suite for your CLI commands, which is awesome. And it runs all of these tests from one source. So you run codecep run, that runs all your tests. Great. So setting up Jenkins or Travis or whatever is super easy. So I'm just going to jump onto some of the basic stuff in Codeception now. Installation. There are 2 ways to install it. You can use Composer. Has everybody heard of Composer? Or has anybody not heard of it? Wicked. Or you can just get the file off of the website, but that's a bit ropey. Set it up, vendor being Codecept, Bootstrap. You're good to go. You're good to start writing your test then. Pro tip from me, add vendor bin to your path. if you're on a Unix-based system. All of our dependencies are normally managed with Composer, so they are on a per project basis. If you add vendor bin to your path, you haven't got to keep typing vendor bin Codeception, vendor bin Drush if you've got it on a per project basis, vendor bin PHPUnit. You just run the command. That is my little helpful hint. So, quick example. What feature do we want to implement? So, somebody comes up to us, and this is a really, really simple example, but it's simple because it's easier to demo. So, our scenario is that an author should be able to create an article. So, we want to check that I've got a username Bill, who's an author. When he tries to create an article, he should be able to. You don't have to write them in this sort of BDD Gherkin style. It was just so it's easier to actually visualize. So we've got this feature. We want to start with a test. So we would run Codeception generates test. Now, Codeception has two different main test types. It has a sest and a sept. Now, a sept is a procedural test. You get one file, and it's pretty much one test per file. It can get unwieldy really, really quickly. So my preference is sests, which are a class-based. It's a class-based system. So rather than having one file with I am blah blah blah, you get a class and you can have a different test in that class with one setup and one teardown. So in this instance, we're going to use a sest. For our acceptance suite, and we're going to call it author permissions. And then Codeception will generate you a stub class. So I've taken out all of the dot blocks here, otherwise it wouldn't fill the slide. That's the only reason my code looks awful. So you've got your setup, your teardown, and that's an example test that it gives you. I don't like that naming convention, but I'll come to that later. If you don't want the setup and teardown, just get rid of it, it'll still work. So how might our test look? And this is going to be a quick example of how you would write a Codeception test. So this is an example here of what you can do in the setup. I'm pulling in the Faker library. Has everybody heard of the Faker library? The Faker library is this fantastic library that's really helpful for testing. You can see in the example down here, it essentially just generates you lorem ipsum for your tests. And it is amazing. So you can get text, addresses, phone numbers, credit card details, and it's don't know if they're real or not, but in this instance you show this fake text. If I wanted a paragraph, you can go this fake a paragraph and it will give you a paragraph. This fake surname, it will just give you a surname. It's really, really useful. Anyway, that's why I pulled that in up here. And it shows you how you can leverage your setups. So this first snip here just outlines your test and just makes it obvious to somebody reading it what you want to test. It's kind of an extra description. So I am an author, I want to create an article, I expect to be able to create an article node. So we want to run this test. So we make sure we're on the page, submit the login form, make sure we're logged in, go to the node add article page, make sure it's a 200, and then we should create a node. It's super simple. So we run this test, and it fails. Now I'm really sorry about the colours on this. I meant to invert it and update it, and I completely forgot. Can anybody actually not read that? Crap. So basically it's saying, it runs through the steps here. So as an author, I expect to be able to create an article node, and it's listing through any of these that fail, it will stop there. It won't let you, it won't continue. With a helpful error message, so it will tell you what test it is that failed and where it failed. So all we can see here is, okay, so just clarify as well, I've cheated a little bit. When I ran these, it wasn't actually strictly TDD, I'd already created an author role, but that was just a demo. So I see the response code is 200, that failed. Now why could that be? It's like, crap, we think we've done everything. Didn't have the user permission for the author role. So we add that, add it, rerun the test. Brilliant, it passes. And then now we encapsulate the feature, commit it, deploy it, whatever. But you now know every time you run your test suite, you're going to be checking that an author can create an article. So if there's been a conflict somewhere in your version control, and that permission's been blatted from that file, you're going to find out about it before it goes out, before somebody who's an author tries to create an article and all hell breaks loose. So that's that. Great, test party. I spent a horribly unprofessional amount of time at work yesterday looking for a Captain Picard one to go there instead. I could not find one. Okay, so that was a basic Codeception test. Did that kind of make sense, how it was written? I'm going to put this all up on GitHub pages after today, when I get home this evening, so you can actually sort of read it a bit better, take it a bit better. Does anybody have any questions so far about what I've spoken about? Am I going too quickly or too slowly, or am I babbling rubbish? Yeah, cool. So I said it's really easy to extend. Now I'm going to talk about that briefly. What time is it? Page objects. Now this is something that is built into Codeception. Has anybody heard of the page object concept before? What it basically is in Codeception terms at least, I think it might be the same in Ruby spec. A page object is a class that describes elements on a page. And the reason that's useful, as well as some basic interactions methods, sorry. The reason that's useful is, say you have 5 or 6 different tests. They all need to test that a user can log in. So in all 5 of your tests, you've got, I can see I submit the form, #user login with this username, this password in these fields. And then someone comes along and builds a completely different login form and integrates it with Drupal, and that's what they want to use. And all of a sudden, all of your selectors have changed, your field names have changed, and all of your tests are broken. Now, you could grep your tests and change it that way, we said, or you could have a page object. And what that would mean is all of your tests would reference that page object and that element on the page object. So you only have to change it in one place. The recommendation from Codeception on their documentation is, if you are interacting with a page, create a page object for it, because you never know when you're going to need to run another test. And there is so little overhead in creating it that I kind of tend to agree. So to create a page object, Codeception has it all built in for you. So Codeception, generate a page object, list your suite, and list the page. So we are going to be generating a page object for our login page, which may look something like this. So you've got just a bunch of static variables, and you just reference the login page, : you're up wherever you want that to be. I think that one might be a good example, because the user login page is possibly the most likely out of these things to change, I guess, to alias it. So usage of a page object. As mentioned, so our previous test where we were testing an author can create article content, the logins have this instead, which is much more manageable and much more future-proof. Something I did forget to go back to is, I mentioned about test function names being a bit of a bugbear of mine. I've seen tests before where the names have been just ridiculous, where they're quite compact. Where it's sort of like public function test author permission, and you might be testing one permission in that test. It doesn't make any sense. A test is almost like documentation for your application. So write long, sensible test names. No one's going to have a pop at you for writing this, but at a glance, it's obvious what we're testing there. We are testing that an author can create article content. That's just my bugbear, sorry. So the page objects, are they okay? Wicked. Step objects. Now, step objects is probably something that you've all just thought to yourself, that's a bit crap that we have to keep doing that. Because I know when we were running through this at CogApp, that was one of the first questions that came out, was we're going to be logging in during our tests on a regular basis. We're going to be logging out on a regular basis. We may even be creating articles in 5, 6, 7 different tests. So what you really want is something where you can just go, rather than I go to page, I fill in this field, you want I log in. So that's where a step object comes into play, which is a class consisting of methods that contain actions or steps that are run. So before, this is what we have in our test when we log in to the site. Isn't that much nicer? And that can then be used in any of your acceptance tests. Can everyone see that? It's literally just I log in. Yeah?
So does it basically just come with a bunch of step objects? Are they implemented the same way?
No, because Codeception isn't Drupal specific. It comes with a generator to create your own page object.
All right, but I mean, like, I am on page. Is that a step object, or is that?
No, it's a step in itself. A step object is a kind of a collection of steps. So I am on page is essentially telling Codeception to fire off guzzle to that, go and get a bunch of markup, and then step through it. And it basically gives the next few lines of your test a context to work with. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. So to create a step object, again, Codeception has a generator for it. There is very little you actually have to write from scratch yourself. And like Chex was saying earlier on, I hate opening up PHP Storm and having a blank page in front of me. It is terrifying. So yeah, this is an example step object. So this, you extend the actual tester. Now the only downside I found with step objects in Codeception is if you've got two different suites that might want to use the same step object, I believe you still have to create it twice, once for each test suite. But I don't think that's the end of the world. It's just a possible annoyance because I've been writing tests recently for a project that isn't responsive but has a separate mobile site. So we've got a suite for the mobile site and a suite for the main site, and I'm copying them around a little bit, which is a bit annoying, but not the end of the world. So, you might notice here as well we're referencing our page object. So these two things can be merged together really, really easily, as long as you use it at the top. Whereas I was mentioning before, Codeception has septs and sests. When you generate step objects and page objects, they are classes. You don't get procedural step objects or procedural page objects. And then usage. So your test immediately is much more readable. I log in. You know, what could be easier than that? So there was going to be a bit of a demo to go with this, but bad things happened. So I'm just going to have to kind of pad it out. My general train of thought with refactoring is I will copy and paste something one time. If I have to copy and paste it again, that means it needs to be a method somewhere that I can call whenever. And it's similar with Codeception. If I log into a site once, that's fine. I won't bother writing a page object, step object. If I have to log into a site twice, I'll copy and paste it. If I have to log in another test, then I need to create a step object. On the other hand, if what I'm doing is not particularly readable in my test, I will also create a step object. So, say you are, I guess, deleting a node. Your test might say, I go to this page, I go to the admin page, I click edit, I click delete. I do that, actually that's probably a bad example because that's perfectly readable. Sorry. But at a glance, you might just prefer to have an delete node method. You know, we pass it a node ID and it will run through all those steps. It just helps to see your tester's documentation. So how did our test look before? This is how it was before. We've created page objects and step objects in this. This is what I was going to demo, so I'm afraid there's no context to this whatsoever. I'm really sorry. Page objects, we've created step objects. We've created a step object called user steps, which is the login one. Which means that our test now just looks like this, which is much more readable. And if I was going to go any further, like I said, I would probably have a node creation one. Just realised I'm horribly going to want to run. So the useful extensions. Codeception is quite new. There aren't a huge amount of extensions available at the moment, but the ones that are there are quite good. This one was written by a guy called Chris Cohen. I don't know if he's here. I know X is here. I think he works there. Which is a repository. It's an extension that's got a bunch of Drupal page objects in it for a load of core pages and some contrib pages. So it'll give you page objects for Google Analytics module if you want to test some interaction with that. User add page, I think it's got some media stuff in as well, but I might be lying. But that's out of the box. So login pages, everything like that. Drupal user registry. Drupal user registry is an extension that allows you to easily and quickly create test users. I can't offer you any more than that. I've not used it, but it looks pretty sweet. Content type registry I have used, and it is also pretty cool until you get field collections, which shouldn't surprise anybody. But you essentially create a YAML file that describes what fields are available on your nodes, what data should go into them as stubs. So you say, I've got a title field, this needs to be text. I've got an image field, here is a test image. And then that allows you to just go, I create a node, and it will create it for you, which is really cool. And my last favourite one is Phantom app. Now this is something I said earlier on that I was going to bring up. JavaScript testing as standard in Codeception out of the box is something you have to use WebDriver for. Now Phantom is a super useful extension that just at the beginning of your test suite fires up Phantom and at the end of it closes it. And I spent an unholy amount of time trying to get Gulp to start up a Phantom instance, run the test, and then close it down. Because of the way that Gulp works, it would start it up. Before it starts it up, it would try and run the test and then shut it down, and Phantom hadn't even started up yet. This gets around that, so you can run JavaScript acceptance tests using Codeception with that. Does everybody know what Phantom is? Does anyone not know? Yeah.
Oh, I do.
You do, yeah, sorry. And you've also got the Codeception add-ons page. They've got a bunch of useful ones on there. There's some WordPress specific ones, but you know, don't like that. And there's also some Drush ones as well, I believe, that allow you to run Drush commands in your tests, which may or may not be useful. I've not found a use for it yet. I mean, you could probably use it if you used it to generate a bunch of test content with Drupal, maybe. Possible alternatives to using Codeception. You could just roll with PHPUnit. Well, actually, the one that I've left off this list is you could roll with SimpleTest. Does anybody actually like using SimpleTest? It's all right.
It's fun.
I think I just get bugged by the setup and teardown taking so long. I think that's literally the only thing that bugs me with it. PHPUnit, PHP spec. PHP spec is a new kid on the block, but from what I understand, it's only really useful for testing class-based things, which Drupal 7 doesn't have much of. When Drupal 8 comes out, it's definitely worth thinking about. It essentially creates a specification for each of the classes. Casper.js. Now, we have an internal dilemma at CogApp where some people prefer Casper and some people like Codeception. I am firmly in the Codeception camp, but I understand the benefits to Casper. We've just started doing a lot more backbone and Angular stuff powered by Drupal backend. You probably wouldn't want to use Codeception for testing that, so Casper's good. Or just Selenium. Selenium. Just use Selenium. I think that's it. The one thing I haven't made a slide about that I wanted to discuss as well was something I don't know if you can do with SimpleTest, but I know you can with Codeception. You can specify with Codeception a stub database. And I've found it faster to take an SQLite database and copy it and use that as your test stub. Does that make sense? I should have prepared a slide on this, I'm really sorry. And that I find is much quicker than SimpleTest. Can SimpleTest do that? Does anyone know? Or is it kind of forced to scaffold test databases in your main install?
There's a module you can use which will use the database that you've already got there, rather than setting up a temporary one. Which is quite useful if you've got very sort of complex data or a complex scenario, which you then back up and restore. When you want to run a test or something.
That might be worth looking into. I might try and grab you later and find out what that is. So that's it. Obligatory CogApp slide. We are hiring. If anybody knows any senior front-end developers or graduate developers, then CogApp is a fantastic place to work for. Thank you. On a slightly different note, not only is CogApp a great place to work for, but we have cake every Thursday. And we just sit down for 15 minutes and eat cake. So I expect to see our recruitment inbox flooded on Monday morning.
We've got Haribo outside as well.
We got what?
We've got Haribo outside as well.
What more could you want? So I also owe you guys an apology. I know on the slide it said I was going to get into more unit testing. I'm really sorry I didn't have time for that. If it's something that people are interested in, I'm happy to update these slides and upload them to my GitHub, or post a blog post about it at a later date. So if you want to know more about it, let me know. And like I said, I'll either write a blog post or update the slides to reflect that. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, yeah.
On one of your earlier slides, you had what looked like Gherkin language, and I just wondered if you had are you able to supply Gherkin language and have Codeception?
No, not that I've seen. I don't think it would be too hard to implement that. But no, I've not seen anything like that. What you can do on the flip side is these tests right where I want to. You can export them as Gherkin style scenarios. So if your producer or project manager came up to you and said, I need to look at what tests you've got running, you can spit that out and give them a list of Gherkin style tests, which is really, really useful. But yeah, I'm afraid you can't do it the other way around, as I understand.
Does it spit out JUnit XML reports?
Can do.
Can do.
Yes. I haven't tried it yet because the project that I'm trying it on hasn't had Jenkins set up and won't be done until Monday, which is annoying.
Okay.
But I will let you know. Yeah.
Say you're testing for, like, an author create a piece of content type.
Yeah.
Has that you wouldn't might not need to write code to actually do that because it's all through the interface. So has that got to be exported to a feature so that it can be tested?
Not necessarily. Well, so long as it's deployable. I should have mentioned before, all of those tests that I wrote were acceptance tests, so they run by scraping DOM content as opposed to a traditional unit test. So, assuming that your tests are all being run on some kind of continuous integration system, the content would have to be available, but that's about it. Is that what you're asking, or did I?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you tend to install Codeception globally on your system, or is it on a per project basis?
I would recommend on a per project basis.
When that step that you said, like to put vendor in the path,
Yeah.
like how do you do that on a per project?
I should have mentioned that kind of assumes that you do stuff from the root from roughly where your Codeception directory is. So I would have a file structure at the moment of a composer.json file in the root, and then probably a documentation folder, and then a doc root folder where all the CMS stuff would be. So I would be running my tests from that root directory, so it would search vendor then bin.
Okay.
But the benefit I find to having it on a per project basis is you don't get conflicts with different versions. We've had to do a lot of work recently at CogApp with our Ruby dependencies and trying to shift bundler around and everything like that, and we didn't really want to have to deal with that with PHP as well, because it's just a headache. But it does mean you can, it's more portable. If somebody else was to start working on a project that I had started, they don't have to install a bunch of dependencies globally, which for me is a win-win. Is that right? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else, or was that kind of okay? Brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody. It wasn't always that point. The first speaking session I've ever done as the first session on the first day of a conference was not something I looked forward to.
Great.
If anybody has any feedback about how I did in general, then please come and find me at some point over the next couple of days, and I'll be happy to accept your criticism and not cry.
Too much to anonymously over Twitter with that.
Yeah, I can deal with that. If, yeah, I can deal with that. Right, thanks, everybody.
You've got to stand outside as well, and you've got flyers and business cards and things. Very nice. Don't like much.
If anyone's interested, Ben over there is actually the Casper fan. We've had a lot of discussions about why Casper is so rubbish in the last couple of weeks.